15. Ben watched Madak carefully as he approached the stone slab, but the man did not take his eyes off the burning tent as he went past the place where Ben had been buried and came on running, the gun balanced in his right hand. Ben heard the tent collapse with a whoosh and the snapping noise of the guy ropes burning through, but he did not take his eyes off Madak. The man was in a fury, his eyes open and staring, his teeth gritted together. When the tent finally went wearily down, Madak slowed and then, as though exhausted, began to walk, coming on a pace by pace, the rifle hanging in his hand. Ben knew that it had to be now. He could feel the butt of his thumb through the dirty hairs of his beard as he drew his hand back. The brace of the slingshot was a steady, unwavering, strong pressure against the inner side of his left arm. Ahead, framing Madak as he came on, now a little crouched as though stalking something, the yoke of the slingshot was firm. Ben tried to make the release an instantaneous thing, no muscle of his hand or fingers moving before or after any other muscle. Oddly, he did not know when the shot left, did not even hear the snap of the rubbers or the slap of the leather holder when it struck the Jeep fender. He saw nothing through the yoke but Madak's right hand. In fact, he saw clearly only the row of knuckles where the fingers joined the hand, a row of little round hills growing smaller, not quite as pink as the flat back of the hand or the rounded surface of the fingers. The skin of the second knuckle peeled back and became stark white for a second and then red. The rifle dropped straight down, bounced off Madak's right foot, and rolled to the sand. For a moment, as Ben loaded again, he lost sight of Madak, but when he looked again, the man was doing a strange, awkward little dance out there in the sand. He was clinging to his right hand with his left and hopping up and down, first on one foot, then the other. As he hopped, he spun slowly around. Suddenly, the dance stopped, and Madak was looking at him, his face wild with pain and fury. The dance had moved him perhaps 5 feet from the rifle, and now he lunged toward it, his left arm reaching out for it, pulling the short-sleeved jacket tight around the muscles of his upper arm. The double-O buckshot didn't make that little hard whistling sound stones made went silently. Madak howled as he jerked his arm back and fell to his hands and knees. He was crawling toward the gun as Ben loaded again. The lead buckshot hit him where the kneecap lay in its cup. It ripped through the cloth and across the knee, opening the flesh. The man kept moving, and Ben hit him again, the shot rattling across the knuckles of his extended left hand. Madak's right hand, the fingers red with blood, reached out and touched the stock of the rifle. The buckshot struck his right wrist, embedding itself in the tendons. Madak, now flat on the desert, slowly pulled his hand back and under his chest as though to protect it. With the slingshot loaded again, Ben stood up and never took his eyes off Madak. Felt around on the tailgate until he found the leather pouch, emptying some of the shot into his mouth. When he put the pouch down again, Madak, lying within reach of the rifle, turned his head in the sand and looked at him, the pale eyes cold, the skin of his freshly shaved face cold. Ben drew the leather holder back in his chin and aimed directly at the uppermost eye. "Don't move again," he said, his words a little slurred by the shot in his mouth. Ben circled carefully around him, aiming at him all the time until he could reach the rifle. He scraped it away from Madak with his foot until he could safely pick it up. Holding the gun aimed point blank at Madak, Ben unmapped the leather sling and flipped it over his shoulder, took the gun in both hands, and walked around until he was behind Madak. He looped the sling around Madak's ankles, drew it tight, and knotted it. As he backed away, Madak started to roll over. Ben spat the buckshot out onto his hand and said, "I told you not to move, so don't move." At the Jeep, he got one of the canvas belts he used to lash the water cans in their racks and went back to Madak. With the rifle muzzle pressed against the back of Madak's neck, Ben reached under him and got the bloody hands out and tied them behind him. Not satisfied with the sling and belt, Ben went over to the butte. It was a simple matter to pull down the rope Madak had looped over the tent pegs. Carrying the rope and tool bag, Ben returned and tied Madak's wrists and ankles with the rope. Rolling Madak over on his back, Ben searched the big flat pockets of the fancy bush jacket, finding the keys to the suitcase and duffel bag and Jeep in one pocket, the rotor and hornet bolt in the other. Ben put the rotor back in first and then unlocked the duffel bag and emptied it out onto the sand. The old man's stained felt hat fell out first. It hurt getting his feet into the boots, but once they were on, his feet only ached a little. Dressed, Ben tossed the slingshot into the front of the Jeep and went back to Madak, who was now sitting up in the sand. Getting him under the arms, he dragged him over to the Jeep, lifted him, and strapped him in with a seatbelt. During all this, Madak only stared at him. It was not a look of anger or defeat or of fear. It was a steady, cold, intelligent probing. Ben had been right. The Jeep did not start at once, and he had to crank it 3 or 4 times before the engine caught and ran. He wheeled the Jeep to the east and headed back toward the little range of mountains. For the first time, Madak spoke. "This isn't the way." "It's the way," Ben said. "Where are you going?" "To get the old man." "Oh," Madak said. "Yes." Ben drove the Jeep up to the same place he had parked it before. He took the rotor out and then took the bolt out of the 358, putting them in his pocket with the hornet bolt. Then he got the old tarpaulin from the floor of the Jeep and went up across the shale to the cliff. The old man was not there. It took Ben a little while to find where Madak had stuffed the naked body under an overhang of rock. Nobody, not even Les Stanton, could have seen him from the air or on foot unless he was looking for the body. The vultures had not touched him yet, but he was stiff in death and hard to wrap and harder to carry. There was a nauseating Swedish smell coming from him as Ben carried him down and laid him in the back of the Jeep, lashing him in, for the tailgate couldn't be closed. As Ben started the engine, Madak said, "Aren't you going to help me?" "Help you do what?" Ben asked, his hand on the gear shift lever. "You've broken my hand, you've broken my wrist, you've broken my leg. I'm bleeding profusely. Aren't you going to help me?" Ben tried to hold back his anger as he put his hand on Madak's back and restraining his desire to shove the man brutally forward, just pushed him enough to see his hands. His right hand was a real mess, covered with sand and blood, the bone of his knuckles sticking out strangely, clean and white. His left arm looked only bruised, a big swollen purple place where the buckshot had torn through the muscle. It wasn't bleeding badly. Pushing Madak back against the seat, Ben reached down, taking the cloth beside the little hole the shot had made, tore open the khaki trousers. Madak's knee was in bad shape, bloody and torn. Ben put the Jeep into gear and started very slowly down the slope. "There's nothing I can do for you," he said, "and you're not bleeding enough to make any difference." On the floor of the desert, Ben turned west and worked up through the gears until the Jeep was going well in third, averaging about 10 miles an hour. When he reached the distant mountains, Ben knew it would be slower going, all four-wheel drive scrambling up and through a long, winding canyon. It was going to be late at night before they got home. After a while, Madak said, "I'm not in a very good position to make a deal with you, Ben, but let's talk." "Go ahead." "You have thought this thing out." "I've thought some about it. I mean all the way out, all the different ways." "Go ahead," Ben told him. "To you, because everything to you is simple and straightforward and honest, this entire little episode may seem just that simple, straightforward, clean cut, no questions." Madak paused for a long time. "I'm different," he said at last. "I guess you could say that I'm a liar, Ben. Yes, I guess some people could say a thing like that." Ben saw Madak's head turn toward him and knew that Madak was looking at him. "I'm not a brand new liar either, Ben. I'm an old hand at it. I've had a lot of practice. As a matter of fact, some people consider me an expert at it. Now, as we discuss this matter, I want you to keep that in mind, Ben. It'll be easy. And I'm a survivor, Ben. That's something you don't know much about, but in the jungle I live in, it takes a smart man to survive. You've got to be smart and shrewd and cold, and you've got to be a professional liar. That's a tough, mean world, Ben. Listen, I'm really in very great pain." Ben turned for a second to look at him, wondering that he felt absolutely nothing for this man. No hatred, no desire for revenge, and no triumph, no sense of victory. Just nothing. "So am I," he said, and there's nothing we can do about it. So you could loosen the rope on my hands. My hand is really in bad shape. Why do you need the rope anyway? I'm helpless, and I might get gangrene this way. You might, Ben said. That's pretty petty and mean, Maddox said. Real petty. I didn't think you were like that, Ben. I'm like that. I'll keep that in mind, Maddox said, and then, as quiet, was quiet for a long time. I suppose you're going straight to the sheriff, Maddox said. That's right. And tell him exactly what happened? Ben nodded. Have you stopped to think that things have become a little more complicated since the other day, Ben? Not to me, they haven't. Oh, yes, they have been. You see, the other day I didn't have a broken hand and a broken leg. I hadn't been viciously cut up, not cleanly shot, mind you, as in self-defense you might have shot me, but deliberately and viciously chopped up, tortured, exactly the way you chopped up the old man, except you killed him, you see. Ben, things have changed. They sure have, Ben said. So I think we ought to talk some, Ben. Now, I don't know whether I told you this, but I'm a rich man. And I'm not stupid. I realize that by talking to me, taking me into the sheriff and telling your story, you might get me into a little trouble. Note that I said you might get me in a little trouble. The fact is that if you want to be stubborn about this, I believe I can get you into extremely serious trouble. In fact, I know I can, so don't sit there like God and think you've got this thing in a bag, my boy. You'll be a lot better off if you stop right here and we work this out. Would you like for me to take off my shoes and clothes and start out again with no water? Ben asked. Maddox laughed. It never happened, Ben, he said pleasantly. It's all a dream you had, a dream nobody will believe. Would you like to know what really happened, Ben? Not your version of it, Ben told him. So keep quiet now, will you? I'm busy. Maddox sat for a long time just staring out at the desert. At last he said, Ben, listen to me. I'll give you $10,000 if you stop right here and bury the old man and say nothing about it. I'm willing to bet $10,000 you'll keep your word. I'll write you a check for the amount right this minute, and I'll go with you to the bank and see that you get it in cash. What'll you write it on? Ben asked. Maddox snapped his head around and looked in the back of the Jeep. His voice was furious as he said, Where's my suitcase? Gone. Gone where? It was in the tent where you left it. Maddox slumped in the seat. Oh, you stupid yokel, he said. Then he straightened and said, Forgive me, Ben. I'm really in great pain and don't mean what I say. I believe it, Ben said. Then believe this too. I can go with you to any bank in the country and get $10,000 cash in 10 minutes. Oh, shut up, Ben said. Just sit there and count your money.